All right, let's jump right in with this deep dive on Mars colonization. We're going to peel back the layers on this one, folks, get past the hype, and really look at, what it would actually be like to live on Mars.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about it, like Mars is going to be humanity's next home,
Hmm.
but I don't think they really think about, what living there would really be like.
Yeah, exactly. And to do that, we're going to be looking at a book called Mars, or Bust, by J.P. Ames. He's a computer scientist, and let me tell you, he does not hold back when it comes to, describing just how hard it would be to actually colonize Mars. So this deep dive is for anyone who's ever looked up at the night sky and thought about what it would be like to live on another planet.
Yeah, Ames, he's a good person to go to for this because he takes a really skeptical look at it. He doesn't just buy into the romanticized version of Mars colonization.
Right, and that's what we want to do here. Right? We want to equip you, the listener, with the knowledge to actually think critically about all these claims that are being made about, Mars colonization. So let's just rip off the Band-Aid and get right into it. The realities of Mars are brutal.
Hmm.
Ames doesn't sugarcoat anything. He tells
Yeah.
you straight up. There's no running water, temperatures make Antarctica look like a tropical vacation, and there's constant radiation exposure. And, oh yeah, you're going to be confined with the same small group of people for a very long time.
And all the things that we just take for granted on Earth, like, breathable air and, getting rid of waste, it would all have to be, like completely recreated on Mars.
Right. Imagine trying to take a shower on Mars. I mean, talk about a logistical nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
It really makes you appreciate how much we rely on Earth just to, do basic things. Ames actually uses this phrase in the book where he talks about, colonists eating the same freeze-dried sadness every single day, living in these tiny little habitats that, give you almost no privacy.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound very appealing, does it?
No, not really.
It's definitely not the, futuristic Martian cities you see in the movies.
It's a good point. And to that point, Ames actually compares Mars to some pretty surprising places.
Really?
He says that, places like Florence, ADX, Supermax Prison, and Guantanamo Bay might actually be more livable.
Wow. Now that's a comparison I wouldn't have made. Why would he compare Mars to those places?
Well, I think it's really about the mental aspect of it.
Yeah.
These places on Earth are rough, but they at least have some basic things and, some social interaction, which you might not find in a brand new Mars colony.
Huh. That's a good point. I mean, can you imagine, being stuck in a tin can on Mars with like 5 other people for years? You'd have to be incredibly mentally tough to handle that.
Absolutely. And the screening process for those colonists would be as much about their, psychology as about, their skills.
Right, right. You'd have to pick the right people for the job. Now, speaking of skills, Ames has this theory about who those first Mars colonists might be. He calls it the skills gap and prison colony concept.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, he thinks Mars might end up being populated by people who are really skilled, but maybe they, made a mistake or two.
Oh.
Or people who just don't have a lot of other options here on Earth.
It's interesting because, he brings up this comparison to how Australia started as a penal colony.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a perfect comparison, of course, but it does make you wonder about, the kind of society that would develop on Mars if it's made up of people who, maybe didn't fit in so well on Earth.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought-provoking idea, right? I mean, part of me thinks it sounds like a recipe for some kind of, space-age Lord of the Flies situation.
Yeah, definitely potential for, some conflicts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about just the practical things, like how would you handle waste on Mars? We take running water and, sanitation for granted here, but it's not going to be that simple on Mars.
No, not at all. In fact, Ames goes into a lot of detail about how waste management would be one of the biggest challenges on Mars.
Okay, so no flushing toilets. What do they do?
Well, they'd have to rely on these things called maximum absorbency garments,
What?
DIGs for short. Basically, they're high-tech adult diapers, and then they'd have to figure out a way to process all that waste in a closed environment.
Well, that's not very glamorous, is it? And I have to ask, what about the smell? I mean, if you're stuck in a sealed habitat with a bunch of people and, a waste containment system, it can't exactly smell like roses up there.
Oh, no. The sensory experience on Mars would definitely be something else.
Yeah.
No fresh air, no natural scents, just the constant smell of recycled air and, whatever else is going on in that habitat.
And then there's the lack of privacy. Ames describes it as this like never-ending group project. You're with the same people 24/7, no escape.
Yeah. And I think that could take a real psychological toll. Imagine you can never be alone, never have a moment to yourself.
He actually outlines the 5 stages of privacy loss on Mars. It starts with denial, then moves to realization, then horror, then acceptance, and finally reckless abandon.
Wow.
Yeah, that last one doesn't sound so good.
It's like you just give up at that point.
So it seems like there's a lot more to Mars colonization than just the technical stuff. It's about the human element too, the psychology, the social dynamics, even just the basic things we take for granted every day.
It's all connected, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about enough.
right. And we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's more.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to dig even deeper into the challenges and consequences of Mars colonization. We'll talk about social control, economic viability, and really get into why we're so obsessed with this seemingly inhospitable planet.
Looking forward to it. So we're back. And last time we were talking about all the challenges of actually living on Mars, like
Yeah.
the harsh environment and the psychological toll it would take. But this time I want to talk about something even more thought-provoking. Ames actually suggests that Mars could become like a penal colony.
Okay, that does sound like something out of a sci-fi movie. But I guess when you think about it, Mars is pretty isolated, and it's not like you could just escape easily.
Yeah, exactly. He makes his argument that because it's so unforgiving and there's really nowhere to go if you try to escape, I mean, you'd basically be committing suicide.
Yeah, no, hiding in a forest or blending in with the locals. There's nothing out there but red dust and thin air.
Exactly. The environment itself would be the prison, right?
Yeah.
And he makes this really interesting comparison to Australia back in the 1800s. They sent convicts there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's kind of a similar situation, right? Sending people to a faraway place that's really hard to live in, and there's not much hope of coming back.
But, I mean, Australia turned out okay in the end, didn't it? They have, like, cities and everything. Could
Yeah.
Mars be like that someday?
Well, that's where the comparison kind of breaks down. I think Australia, even though it was harsh, it still had resources,
Yeah.
and a climate that could support people. Mars is just fundamentally different.
Mhm.
There's not much there. And the climate is so hostile, you'd need constant technology just to survive.
That's true. And plus, we were just talking about the mental strain on colonists, right?
Right.
Imagine if you added a bunch of criminals or people who had trouble following rules. It could get pretty chaotic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ames is worried about how a Mars colony would even maintain order,
Mhm.
especially if resources are scarce and people are already stressed out.
It's like all those pressures would just build up and could explode at any moment.
Exactly. It would be this constant struggle to keep things under control.
Huh.
And speaking of control, let's talk about the senses. It's not just about what you see and hear on Mars, but the overall lack of sensory stimulation that could be a problem.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that. Like, no fresh air, no sunlight, just the same artificial lights and the hum of machines all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, you'd be stuck in this little box with the same few people. And Ames describes it as sensory deprivation, which could lead to boredom, apathy, maybe even like cognitive decline.
Wow, that's scary. I mean, our brains need variety and new things to stay healthy, right?
They do, yeah. And Mars just doesn't offer that. And then there's the noise. You can never really escape from the sound of the life support systems or the other colonists. It must be really hard to find any peace and quiet.
That's a good point. All that noise would just make it even harder to feel like you have any privacy or personal space.
Exactly. It would really wear you down after a while.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got limited resources, a harsh environment, the possibility of, social unrest, and even sensory deprivation. Anything else?
Well, yeah, the big question is there anything good about Mars? Like, are there any economic reasons to go there?
Well, Ames does look into that too. He talks about things like mining and research and even tourism, but they all have problems.
Okay. Let's start with mining. What could you even mine on Mars that would be worth the cost?
Well, some people think there might be rare minerals or water ice that you could use for fuel, but honestly, it's all pretty speculative at this point.
Yeah. What about research? I mean, there's got to be some scientific value in studying Mars, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. There's a lot we could learn about planets and climate change and maybe even, finding evidence of life. But Ames says that the really big discoveries would probably happen pretty early on. After that, you'd need a lot of money and resources just to keep the research going.
Okay. And what about tourism? I mean, after everything we've talked about, who would want to go on vacation to Mars?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't exactly be a relaxing trip. But as technology gets better and cheaper, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe space tourism will become more common.
But you'd still be stuck wearing space diapers and eating freeze-dried food and worrying about radiation. I don't know. It doesn't sound that appealing to me.
I get it, yeah. The first tourists on Mars would probably be those hardcore adventurers who don't mind roughing it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to imagine it ever becoming like, a mainstream vacation spot.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like there are any clear economic reasons to go to Mars either. But even beyond that, there's a bigger question. What happens when the excitement dies down? When the news stops covering it and the money dries up, what happens to those colonists who are left stranded on this, desolate planet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And Ames actually addresses that with this fictional example. He talks about a Mars colony called Apollo 127, where the colonists, they've been there for decades. They asked to come back to Earth.
Oh, wow.
But mission control, they're dealing with budget cuts and other problems. So they say no.
That's awful. So you're saying we might send people to Mars and then just abandon them there?
It's a possibility,
Yeah.
right? And it raises all sorts of ethical questions, Like,
Yeah.
are we prepared to take care of these colonists even if things get tough?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of space exploration, but we also need to think about the long-term consequences.
Exactly. And Ames makes this other really provocative point.
Mm-hmm.
He says that maybe the reason we're so obsessed with Mars isn't because we actually want to go there, but because it's a convenient way to get rid of people we don't want on Earth.
Whoa, okay. That's a little dark. But I mean, I can see where he's coming from. Throughout history, we've always sent people away, as punishment or because they were seen as a threat.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, who would we send to Mars? Maybe people who are causing trouble or who don't fit in.
So Mars could become like a dumping ground for all the people we don't want here on Earth.
It's a disturbing thought, yeah. But it forces us to think about our motivations.
Yeah.
Why are we so obsessed with Mars? Is it really about exploration or is it something else?
This whole deep dive has been pretty eye-opening. I mean, we started with all this excitement about space travel, and now we're talking about penal colonies and, abandoning people on a hostile planet.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's complicated. But I think it's important to talk about these things because Mars colonization isn't just about technology. It's about us. It's about what kind of future we want to create, both for ourselves and for the people we send to this new world.
Okay, so we've really dug into some of the not-so-fun realities of Mars colonization over these past two parts. It seems like every time we answer one question, we just come up with 5 more, right? But now I'm curious, with all those challenges, all those risks, why are we still so fascinated with Mars?
It really is a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know how difficult it would be, how dangerous even, but there's just this pull, this fascination with the red planet.
Yeah. Ames actually calls it the Mars paradox. We love the adventure, the mystery, but we also can't ignore the potential for things to go very, very wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Mars is like this symbol of both our hopes and our fears. It's the ultimate frontier, a chance to test ourselves as a species.
So it's not just about the physical place itself, right? It's about what Mars represents for humanity. It's almost like a blank slate for our imaginations.
Exactly. And that's why it's been in our stories and myths for centuries.
Yeah.
From the ancient Romans to modern sci-fi. Mars has always had this hold on us.
I guess we've built up this whole mythology around it, haven't we? Like, it's a place where we can escape our problems and start fresh.
And I think that's part of the appeal, right?
Yeah.
Especially now, with all the problems we're facing here on Earth, climate change, political instability, you name it, Mars looks like a way out.
The ultimate escape fantasy. Pack your bags and head to a brand new planet where you can build a better future.
Yeah, but as we've been talking about, it's not that simple. You can't just escape your problems by moving to a different planet.
Right. They'll just follow you there, maybe even get worse.
And that's a big part of Ames' argument. He doesn't think we should be focused on escaping Earth. He thinks we should be trying to fix the problems we have here.
So instead of looking to the stars, we should be taking care of our own backyard.
Exactly. He makes a really strong case for appreciating Earth for all its beauty and working together to make it a better place for everyone.
It's a good reminder that this is the only home we have, at least for now.
Right. And we have the resources, the knowledge, the people to solve these problems.
So where does that leave us? Should we give up on space exploration completely?
No, I don't think that's what Ames is saying.
All right.
He still believes in exploration and scientific discovery, but he wants us to be careful, to think about the consequences and to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons.
So it's about responsible exploration, right? Not just charging ahead without thinking about the long-term impacts.
Exactly. If we do go to Mars, we need to do it the right way, with a clear plan and a commitment to sustainability.
Well, I think it's safe to say this deep dive has given us a lot to think about. It's clear that Mars colonization is a lot more complicated than just sending rockets and planting flags. It's about the future of humanity, what kind of species we want to be.
It's a huge undertaking,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to approach it with a lot of thought and care.
And most importantly, we can't let our fascination with Mars distract us from the problems we face here on Earth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to take care of our own planet, even as we explore new ones.
This has been a fascinating journey. I know I'll never look at those headlines about Mars the same way again.
I hope so.
Well,
It's important to be informed, to think critically, and to appreciate the wonders of our own world.
and on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We hope this has given you a new perspective on Mars, space exploration, and maybe even our place in the universe.